Alright, so I wanted to make a video over some of the things that I've seen in the New Testament that I used to kind of just look over, as probably most people do, and they don't really have an understanding of there's actually a bigger meaning behind these things. And it's a pretty amazing thing when you actually go back and you see it and how these things tie together. So we're going to go ahead and jump into it and read. The first one is going to be out of the book of John. It's John 19:34. It says, "But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once there came out blood and water." So the reason behind the blood and the water, it's a medical reasoning behind it. Basically, when he pierced his side, he was checking to see if he was still alive. And whenever you're in a crucifixion position, you're extended out into full lock. So your lungs aren't able to take in any air. So when he wanted to breathe, he would have to lift up his back and lift his whole body up and scrape his back, his wounded back, from all the whipping and the flogging that he received up against the wood. And he would have to continually lift up and down to inhale and exhale. And eventually he wouldn't be able to do this anymore. His body would be fatigued. He would be going through so much pain that he would just have to let go and release himself. And once he did that, his body, his lungs would start to fill with fluid, and he was basically drowning. And it's one thing, when you actually look into it, it's one thing to say, I understand that he died for me, and my Messiah died for me. He died for me, for my sins. But when you know what he went through to make that happen, it really puts a reality to it. And it really makes you think about the price that he paid for us and how much he truly loved us to do so. So we're going to tie that verse in with two other verses from the New Testament. Go back to the Old Testament, see the meaning behind it, and then tie it again into the New Testament. So here we go. John 19:28 through 29. And it says, "And now after this, Jesus, knowing that all was finished, to fulfill the scripture, I thirst. A jar of sour wine stood there, and they put a sponge full of sour wine on a hyssop branch and held it out to his mouth." So he took the sour wine, poured it on the sponge, stuck it on a hyssop branch, and held it up to him. The next one is going to be Matthew 27:27 through 28. It says, "And then the soldiers of the governors took Jesus to the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him, and they stripped him, and they put on a scarlet robe." So we have the scarlet, we have the blood and the water that came out of his side, and then we have the hyssop branch that held the sour wine. So what do these three things have in common? Well, when you go back to the Torah, one of the first 5 books of Moses, you can read in Leviticus what they are actually pointing to. And we see in Leviticus 14:48 through 53, it says, "And if the priest shall come in and look upon it, and behold, the plague has not spread in the house, and after the house is plastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house clean, because the plague is healed, and he shall take and cleanse the house with 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. And he shall kill one of the birds in the earthen vessel over running water. And he shall take the cedar wood, and the hyssop, and the scarlet, and the living bird, and dip them in the blood of the slain bird, and in the running water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. And he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird, and with the running water, and with the living bird, and with the cedar wood, and the hyssop, and with the scarlet. And he shall let go the living bird out of the city into the open fields, and make an atonement for the house, and it shall be clean." So we see that you have right here, it's the hyssop, the scarlet, the cedar wood, blood, and water. So all of these things, we have that here. So you see the Messiah, scarlet robe, branch of hyssop was extended out to him. You see the blood and the water that came from his side. So we're missing one, the cedar. Where is that at? Well, if you look into the cross and the wood that the cross was most likely made out of, so you can actually go and look this up. One of the sources that I found was provenway.org, and it says the following: "A definite biblical or authorized historical record does not exist that specifies the type of wood which Jesus' cross was crafted from. While the Eastern Orthodox tradition claims that the cross was built from possibly 3 different species of wood, namely cedar, pine, and cypress, other traditions claim that it was made from a single piece of wood." So regardless if it was 3 pieces, I think it might have been just the one cedar. So you have the cedar, the hyssop, the scarlet, the water, and the blood, all 5 things. What was he doing? Well, that was pointing, it was a foreshadow of the Messiah coming to cleanse the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And basically what had happened was Israel, when they went into the land, they were married to God. When they went into the land, they committed spiritual adultery. And they went after other gods, something they were strictly told not to do. They started seeking out the other gods and how to worship them. And he ended up writing them a bill of divorce. So we'll go over into, I think it's Jeremiah 3, is where we'll continue on. So Jeremiah. All right, bear with me. Pages. All right, so Jeremiah 3. Yep, Jeremiah 3:1, and it says, "If a man put away his wife, and she go from him, shall she become another man's? Shall she be returned to her again? So shall that land not be greatly polluted? But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers, and yet you have returned again to me, saith the Lord." So if you want to figure out what it's saying here and basically what it's alluding to, it says, should a woman come back to a man, or a man take his wife back after she's done went out and committed adultery, then you go back to the law of divorce, which is given in Deuteronomy 24. So you go back to Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy 24, verse 1, it says, "When a man has taken a wife and has married her, and it comes to pass that she finds no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorce, and give it into her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she has departed out of his house, she may go in and to another man's wife. And if the latter husband hates her and writes her a bill of divorce, and gives it into her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies, which took her to be his wife, then her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her back again to be his wife. After that she is defiled, for it is an abomination before the Lord." So if a woman has adultery, if a married woman goes and leaves, even if the man divorced her, she cannot go out and be with another man. And if that man dies, or if that man divorces her, she cannot come back to her former husband. It's not allowed in God's law. So when we see that Israel had been divorced in the Old Testament, all the prophets were trying to figure out, they knew he was going to bring back their people, and they knew that the house of Israel and the house of Judah were going to be made one again, as seen in Isaiah. They were going to come back. The 2 sticks were going to be made one. But how was that going to happen? It didn't make any sense, because it's contradictory to what the Torah says. So when you go into Romans, I think is where we're going to read out of next. It's going to be Romans 7:2-3. Romans 7, 2-3. So, "For the woman that which has a husband is bound by law to her husband as long as he lives. But if the husband is dead, she is loosed from that law of her husband. So then if, while the husband is alive, she may be married to another man, she is called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no longer an adulteress, and she could be married to another man." So we see here that if a man dies, then she is able to be freed from that adulteress title and actually be free to marry another man. So let's go to Ephesians. Ephesians 5:25, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's 5:25. Yep, 5:25 through 27. So it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present to him a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loves his wife loves himself. He came, so this whole thing that it ties into, he was the bird that was dead and made alive. And through his blood, he has saved the church. He has brought Israel back. He has grafted us back in. And that's seen in Romans 11. So we see that he came, the husband of the Old Testament, came in the flesh, John 1:14. And he died on that cross so that we could be brought back to himself. That's amazing. All right, hope you guys like that.